Steve Harvey had established clear rules for Family Feud tapings over his 13 years of hosting the show. Contestants were required to silence their phones before stepping onto the stage, a standard protocol designed to prevent disruptions during filming and maintain the professional atmosphere necessary for quality television production. On that memorable Tuesday afternoon in September 2024, one contestant's failure to follow this simple instruction would create a moment that transcended ordinary game show drama and exposed a personal crisis that nobody in the studio could have anticipated. What began as a minor annoyance when a phone rang during taping would escalate into a revelation so shocking that Steve Harvey would temporarily lose his characteristic composure. The audience would sit in stunned silence, and a family would confront painful truths that had been hidden beneath layers of deception and broken trust. If you value authentic stories that explore the complex realities of modern relationships and the consequences of dishonesty, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for content that goes beyond superficial entertainment to examine the genuine human experiences that shape our lives. The Morrison family from Michigan had traveled to the Family Feud studio with high spirits and genuine excitement about their opportunity to compete on national television. David Morrison, 41 years old and employed as a regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical company, stood at the center of his family lineup alongside his wife Angela, his sister Rebecca, his brother-in-law Marcus, and his cousin Travis. David projected an image of professional success and family commitment. He wore a well-tailored suit that suggested financial stability. His interactions with his wife appeared affectionate and supportive, and his enthusiasm for the game seemed genuine as he encouraged his family members during the pre-taping preparations. Angela Morrison, 38 years old and working as an elementary school principal, stood beside her husband with obvious pride in their appearance together on the show. They had been married for 14 years and had 2 children at home being cared for by Angela's parents during the taping. The game progressed through its initial rounds with competitive energy and entertaining moments. The Morrison family faced the Taylor family from Florida in a close contest that saw both teams demonstrating solid knowledge of survey answers and quick reflexes at the buzzer. Steve Harvey delivered his trademark humor and reactions, creating an atmosphere of fun competition that had the studio audience engaged and responsive. The Morrison family had built a slight lead heading into the 4th round, and team morale appeared strong as family members celebrated good answers and supported each other through less successful responses. During a transition between rounds, while Steve Harvey was reviewing the score and preparing to introduce the next question, a phone began ringing audibly in the studio. The sound cut through the relative quiet of the moment, and Steve immediately stopped his commentary to address the disruption. His expression shifted from friendly host to mildly annoyed professional as he looked toward the Morrison family podium where the ringing clearly originated. "Okay, whose phone is that? Y'all know the rules. Phones need to be silenced during taping." His tone carried the patient frustration of someone who had addressed this issue countless times over the years. David Morrison's face flushed with embarrassment as he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his still-ringing phone. He glanced at the screen, and in that brief moment, his expression transformed from simple embarrassment to something approaching panic. Steve Harvey, standing close enough to observe David's reaction, noticed the shift immediately. "Everything okay there, David? You look like you just saw a ghost." The comment was delivered with Steve's typical humor, an attempt to lighten what seemed like a minor awkward moment. David fumbled with the phone, clearly attempting to silence it quickly and return it to his pocket. However, before he could complete this action, Angela Morrison leaned over to look at the screen. What she saw there caused her to reach out and grab the phone from her husband's hand with sudden urgency. Her voice, when she spoke, carried a sharp edge that cut through the studio atmosphere. "Who is Cassandra, and why is she calling you baby with a heart emoji?" The studio fell into immediate silence. Steve Harvey's eyebrows shot up in his characteristic expression of surprise, though this time the surprise carried genuine concern rather than performative humor. David Morrison appeared frozen, his mouth opening and closing without producing coherent words. Angela stared at her husband with an expression that combined confusion, suspicion, and rising anger. The other Morrison family members exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly uncertain about what was unfolding, but sensing that something significant was occurring. Angela, still holding the phone, made a decision that would transform the entire situation. She answered the call and put it on speaker for everyone in the immediate vicinity to hear. A woman's voice came through clearly, affectionate and unsuspecting of the audience now listening. "Hey baby, I'm sorry to bother you during your game show thing, but I just wanted to confirm what time you'll be back tonight. I made dinner reservations for us at that Italian place you love, and I want to make sure the timing works with your flight." The words hung in the air like an indictment. Angela's face had gone pale, and her hand trembled slightly as she continued holding the phone. David reached for it desperately, but Angela stepped back, keeping it away from him. She spoke into the phone with forced calm that barely concealed her emotional state. "This is Angela Morrison, David's wife. Who are you and why are you making dinner reservations with my husband?" The silence that followed was devastating. Then Cassandra's voice returned, now confused and concerned. "I'm sorry, what? David's wife? David told me he was divorced 2 years ago. We've been together for 18 months. We lived together in his apartment in Detroit." Angela's legs seemed to give way slightly, and she grabbed the podium for support. Steve Harvey moved closer, his professional instincts telling him this situation required intervention, but his experience providing no template for how to handle a spouse discovering an affair via speakerphone on a game show stage. David Morrison finally found his voice, though it emerged weak and desperate. "Angela, I can explain. This isn't what it sounds like." His wife turned to him with fury and anguish competing for dominance in her expression. "You can explain how you've been living with another woman who thinks you're divorced. You can explain how you've been maintaining an entire separate relationship for 18 months while coming home to me, and our children every week pretending everything is normal." The full scope of David's deception was beginning to emerge through the fragments of conversation and reaction. Steve Harvey, recognizing that the situation had moved far beyond anything appropriate for a game show taping, signaled to his production team to stop filming. However, before the cameras stopped rolling, David made the situation significantly worse by attempting to grab his phone from Angela while pleading with her to end the call. The physical struggle for the phone, brief though it was, captured on camera the desperation of a man whose carefully constructed lies were collapsing in the most public possible venue. Angela maintained control of the phone and continued speaking to Cassandra, her voice growing stronger as shock transformed into determination to understand the full truth. "How did you meet David? When did this relationship start? What exactly has he told you about his life?" Cassandra, audibly upset and confused, explained that she had met David at a professional conference 18 months earlier. He had told her he was recently divorced with shared custody of his children, which explained his weekly absences when he returned to Michigan for what he claimed were custody weekends and work obligations. She had believed they were building a future together, had introduced him to her family, and had made plans that assumed their relationship was exclusive and honest. The revelation that David had been essentially living a double life, maintaining his marriage and family in suburban Michigan while simultaneously building a relationship with another woman in Detroit, created a crisis that extended far beyond the immediate personal betrayal. Angela began questioning aloud how the finances had worked, whether David had been supporting two households, what other lies might be hidden beneath the ones now exposed. Her questions tumbled out rapidly, each one representing another layer of trust being stripped away as she processed the magnitude of his deception. Steve Harvey, who had remained largely silent during the initial confrontation while trying to determine the appropriate response, finally stepped forward with authority and compassion. "Okay, we need to stop this right now. Angela, David, this is a private matter that needs to be handled away from cameras and audiences. I'm going to have our staff take you to a private room where you can continue this conversation without spectators." His voice carried both firmness and genuine concern for the people whose personal crisis was unfolding in such a devastatingly public manner. Angela, however, was not ready to retreat into privacy. She turned to Steve with tears streaming down her face, but her voice steady with conviction. "Mr. Harvey, I appreciate your concern, but I want everyone here to witness what's happening. I want it on record. David has apparently been lying to me for at least 18 months, probably longer. He's been lying to this other woman about being divorced. He's been lying to everyone about everything. The only way I can trust that I'm finally hearing truth is if it happens in front of witnesses who can confirm what was actually said." This reasoning, born from the shock of discovering that her understanding of reality had been fundamentally false, resonated with something Steve Harvey understood about the need for verification when trust has been completely destroyed. He nodded slowly, acknowledging the validity of her position even as he remained concerned about the wisdom of conducting such a confrontation publicly. "Angela, I hear you and I understand, but think about your children. Think about what it means for this to be broadcast on national television. You can't take this back once it's out there. Angela's response reflected the complicated calculation of someone weighing private dignity against the need for public accountability and truth. My children are going to be hurt either way, Mr. Harvey. But maybe if this is public, maybe if other women see what happened here, they'll pay attention to their own instincts when something doesn't feel right in their relationships. Maybe they'll ask harder questions when their husbands start working late more often, or taking more business trips, or being unavailable in ways that don't quite add up. During this exchange, David Morrison had been attempting to speak, to explain, to somehow contain the damage that was expanding with each passing moment. His attempts were met with Angela's unwavering refusal to hear excuses or justifications until she had complete information about the extent of his deception. She turned back to the phone, where Cassandra was still connected and listening to the entire confrontation, and asked direct questions designed to establish a timeline and scope of the relationship. What emerged from this painful conversation was a picture of systematic deception that had required significant effort and planning to maintain. David had been telling his wife that his job required increased travel to the Detroit area for an expansion project, which explained his frequent absences. He had been telling Cassandra that his custody arrangement required him to return to suburban Michigan every week, which explained the same absences from her perspective. He had been managing two separate lives with sufficient skill that neither woman had suspected the truth, though both had occasionally noticed small inconsistencies that they had rationalized away rather than investigated thoroughly. The financial deception was equally significant. David had been maintaining an apartment in Detroit that Angela knew nothing about, paying for dinners and entertainment in both locations, and essentially splitting his income between two households while his wife believed they were saving for their children's college education and their retirement. The discovery that their joint financial goals had been undermined by David's secret spending added another dimension to Angela's sense of betrayal. Steve Harvey, witnessing the scope of deception being revealed and recognizing the profound pain being experienced by both women who had been victimized by David's dishonesty, made a decision to use his platform to address the broader implications of what was occurring. He turned to the studio audience and spoke with unusual seriousness about the nature of trust in relationships, the warning signs that partners might be living double lives, and the importance of honest communication versus the devastating consequences of sustained deception. The taping was eventually suspended, though not before the essential elements of David's betrayal had been captured on camera and witnessed by everyone present. Angela Morrison, demonstrating remarkable composure given the circumstances, made arrangements to return home separately from her husband. She also made the difficult decision to speak briefly with Cassandra, not to attack or blame her, but to share information and recognize that they had both been deceived by the same person. This unexpected alliance between the two women, united by their experience of being lied to by someone they had trusted, created a moment of solidarity that resonated deeply with the audience members who witnessed it. David Morrison attempted several times to speak with his wife, to apologize, to explain his actions in ways that might make them comprehensible if not forgivable. Angela refused these attempts, stating clearly that she needed time and space to process what she had learned before she could even consider hearing his explanations. She left the studio with her sister Rebecca, who provided both emotional support and practical assistance in making arrangements for Angela's return home and the difficult conversations that would need to occur with their children. When the episode eventually aired 4 months after taping, the decision to include the entire confrontation sparked intense debate about privacy, public accountability, and the role of media in exposing private betrayals. The network included extensive resources at the end of the episode for people dealing with infidelity, for those seeking counseling services, and for individuals who suspected their partners might be living double lives and needed guidance about how to investigate their concerns safely and legally. The response from viewers was overwhelming and deeply divided. Thousands of people expressed sympathy for Angela and appreciation for her courage in confronting the situation publicly rather than hiding in shame despite having done nothing wrong. Many women shared their own stories of discovering that their partners had been maintaining secret relationships or double lives, describing the particular devastation of realizing that their entire understanding of reality had been built on lies. The episode became a catalyst for conversations about the warning signs of deception in relationships and the importance of trusting instincts when something feels wrong. Other viewers criticized the decision to air such private pain publicly, arguing that the confrontation should have remained confidential regardless of Angela's choice in the immediate aftermath of her discovery. They questioned whether informed consent was truly possible in the shock and trauma of such a moment, and whether the network had an ethical obligation to protect people from decisions they might later regret, even if those people had given permission in the moment. Angela Morrison, in a follow-up interview conducted 6 months after the incident, discussed her decision to allow the episode to air and her feelings about the public nature of her discovery. She acknowledged that seeing the footage was painful and that she sometimes questioned whether she should have insisted on privacy. However, she maintained that the public exposure had served important purposes. It had created accountability that prevented David from attempting to manipulate the narrative or minimize his actions. It had connected her with other women who had experienced similar betrayals and who provided support and understanding that friends without such experience could not offer. And it had sparked conversations about honesty in relationships that she believed could help prevent others from experiencing the same devastation she had endured. The revelation also had significant consequences for Cassandra, who had been an unwitting participant in David's deception rather than a willing conspirator in destroying his marriage. She provided a statement through her attorney expressing her shock at learning the truth about David's marital status and her sympathy for Angela and her children. She explained that she had been completely deceived and had ended the relationship immediately upon discovering that David was married. The statement included an apology to Angela for any pain her relationship with David had caused, even though that pain had been inflicted through deception rather than intentional wrongdoing. David Morrison's professional life suffered significant consequences from the public exposure of his deception. His employer, concerned about the judgment and ethics demonstrated by his maintenance of a double life, placed him on administrative leave pending an investigation into whether his behavior violated company policies or had involved misuse of company resources. The investigation revealed that David had been claiming business expenses for personal trips related to his relationship with Cassandra, resulting in his termination for fraud and misrepresentation. The divorce proceedings between Angela and David were contentious and complicated by the financial deception that had occurred throughout their marriage. Angela's attorney successfully argued that David's maintenance of a secret household and his misrepresentation of their financial situation constituted fraud that should affect the division of assets and spousal support determinations. The court awarded Angela a significantly larger portion of their marital assets than would typically be expected in their state, recognizing the financial harm caused by David's deception. Steve Harvey addressed the incident extensively in his various media platforms, discussing how it had affected him personally and what lessons he believed it offered about relationships and honesty. He spoke about the particular cruelty of long-term deception, emphasizing that David's betrayal was not a single moment of weakness, but rather a sustained pattern of lying that had required constant effort and planning. He discussed the importance of creating relationships where honesty is valued and rewarded rather than punished, so that partners feel safe addressing problems directly rather than escaping into secret lives. The Morrison family incident became a reference point in discussions about infidelity, double lives, and the psychology of sustained deception. Mental health professionals analyzed the cognitive mechanisms that allow people to maintain such extensive lies, explaining that compartmentalization, rationalization, and gradual escalation create situations where individuals convince themselves that their deception is manageable or even justified by circumstances. They emphasized that David's case, while dramatic in its public exposure, represented patterns that occurred more frequently than most people realized. As this remarkable and troubling story reaches its conclusion, the lessons it offers remain profoundly relevant for anyone navigating the complexities of trust and honesty in relationships. David Morrison's double life, exposed by a simple phone call during a game show taping, demonstrated how extensive deception can hide beneath the surface of apparently normal and successful lives. Angela Morrison's response to that discovery, choosing public accountability over private shame, illustrated the strength required to confront devastating truths and the importance of creating narratives based on reality rather than comfortable fictions. If this story prompted reflection on the foundations of trust in your own relationships and the importance of honesty even when truth is difficult, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. The capacity for deception exists alongside the capacity for honesty in all of us, and the choices we make between these options shape not only our own lives, but the lives of everyone who trusts us. The moment when David Morrison's phone rang on the Family Feud stage, exposing secrets he had worked for 18 months to maintain, serves as a powerful reminder that truth has a way of emerging regardless of our efforts to suppress it, and that the consequences of sustained dishonesty ultimately dwarf whatever temporary benefits deception might seem to offer.